Hi there, my name is Ananda Moore. I am a practicing homeopath. I've been working as a homeopath professionally for almost 20 years. I am also a filmmaker, and maybe you recognize me from my documentary Magic Pills. This is, I think, a really important documentary. It went out into the world in 2017, and it addresses how the mainstream media has produced a narrative about homeopathy and presents it as something that is quackery with an unscientific foundation. And I challenge that in the film. We go out into the world, travel to places like Cuba, Switzerland, Tanzania, and all over to see the scientific background of homeopathy, the scientific foundation, and the use of homeopathy successfully in very large scale use. So I encourage you to check out the film. I provide you the link at the end of the session. Also, I was co-owner of Riverdale Homeopathy for almost 20 years, I think. It's an amazing store, a source for anything homeopathic you might ever need in Canada. And I've been a health advocate and worked in homeopathic associations, the counselor for the College of Homeopaths of Ontario, and very involved in the community for many years. So thank you for checking out my presentation. I hope you enjoy it. Hello and welcome. This lecture today is called Homeopathic Foundations, and it's a second part to Homeopathy 101, which was taught by Dr. Timothy Miller. So welcome. As always, we have a disclaimer, which is about using your common sense. None of this information here is considered proper medical advice. Always consult with your doctor, your medical practitioner, and deal with your emergency and acute situations and chronic conditions intelligently. Get the advice you need. So I am so excited to be here sharing with you my love for this magical art we call homeopathy. I used to be a devout skeptic of homeopathy, and one day I had this incredible experience that totally transformed my life. It was a very simple experience. I was backpacking through India, and like everyone traveling through India, at one point we get hit by a bad case of Delhi belly. And I woke up, I was feeling really sick. And I was traveling with this girl from Germany whose mother was a homeopath. So she pulls out her little homeopathic kit and says, "Here, take this." And I'm just thinking to myself, I'll take your placebo. I'll show you it doesn't work. And I took her little magic pills, and within about 15 minutes, my symptoms were gone. I felt well. I got up, I went and had breakfast. And I realized that the guest house I was staying in was full of people that were sick. And I was the only one to get better that quickly. So that really made me think and started me down the rabbit hole as I started to consider the possibility of homeopathy being a real thing. And eventually I went and dedicated my life to this fine art. So with that little story, I want to begin and say first that Dr. Timothy Miller has spoken at great length about many of the foundational tenets of homeopathy as part of HomeoSummit. And this lecture today is a follow-up to his presentation, so I encourage you to watch his lectures first. James Tyler Kent is one of homeopathy's great practitioners and teachers, and I wanted to read this quote from him. "The perfection of cure consists then first in restoring health, and this is to be done promptly, mildly, and permanently, which is the second point. The cure must be quick or speedy. It must be gentle, and it must be continuous and permanent." And I think it's a beautiful summary of what Dr. Hahnemann, Dr. Samuel Hahnemann, the developer of homeopathy, meant for us to do as practitioners. Dr. Hahnemann developed a system, a healing modality that would be gentle, would restore balance to the entire person without harm. And I'm so therefore pleased to be here with you today, sharing more of this beautiful art. We're going to start by talking about acute versus chronic conditions. An acute condition is a self-limiting illness that either resolves, in other words, in allopathic medicine, there's an expectation that this condition is curable or it's going to end in death. And by allopathic medicine, I'm referring to conventional medicine. Dr. Samuel Hahnemann came up with that term, and it's been used ever since by natural practitioners and also by conventional practitioners. An acute condition does not necessarily mean it's new, although many newly diagnosed diseases do present with acute symptoms. It does not mean that it's a severe illness either. It can be, but it can also be something that's mild. So it means that symptoms develop quickly and they're expected to resolve. So something like a cold, a flu, food poisoning, an ear infection, maybe something more serious like a broken bone, or even a heart attack. Now, a chronic condition is something that affects a person over a long period of time. And in the allopathic model, they consider it to be an incurable condition and something that can only be managed. It doesn't mean that it's fatal or it's something that will inherently shorten your life. It just means that in the allopathic model, they can't cure that condition. And so they end up managing the condition with things like steroids, for example. Now, a newly diagnosed illness can also be labeled a chronic condition, something like an autoimmune disease, allergies, arthritis, maybe digestive disorders, or degenerative disorders. The way a homeopath handles an acute and a chronic condition is very different. So in a chronic condition, for example, I can spend up to 2 hours working with the patient. And this is where I look for what we call a constitutional remedy. And I'm going to talk more about this in a second. But basically, it's a long consultation where we look to find a remedy that addresses as much of a person's symptoms on their physical, mental, and emotional states. In an acute condition, we look to quickly understand the totality of symptoms of the presenting state. And by totality of symptoms, I want to understand what is the condition, why it happened, how is it expressing, and are there any unique symptoms within this condition that are specific to you? And these modalities, such as what makes you feel better or worse, what time do things hurt or bother you? So for me, a typical acute consultation takes about 15 minutes, which is a stark contrast to the 2 to 3 hours that I can take with a chronic. So moving on to a constitutional remedy. As homeopaths, we always take the totality of symptoms when we give a remedy. So this means that we look at as many aspects as possible when considering what the appropriate remedy is to give. And when working with chronic conditions, this is the best approach. Sometimes a constitutional remedy can also help resolve an acute condition. Not always, but a constitutional remedy is one that considers the entire individual. Every person is unique, and that best homeopathic remedy takes that uniqueness into account. So this is a remedy that looks to address the majority of a person's physical symptoms, as well as their mental and emotional state. So we take into account a person's fears, their disappointments, their traumas, their childhood experiences, your outlook, and a person's general disposition. We also look at their body temperature, food likes and dislikes, foods that don't sit well, how your thirst is, those little general symptoms that are unique from person to person. This is also where we can address the really deep traumas, sometimes unconscious ones that may have led to our illness. This is really where you need to work with a homeopath. Even homeopaths usually don't self-prescribe on this level for themselves. We really need to have that point of perspective and that external position to be able to dive deep into constitutional prescribing. Now, the basis of constitutional prescribing is what healing on the level of what we call the vital force. The vital force is an energy, it's a foundational energy system that maintains life in animals and plants and people. It's what separates the living from the non-living. So this is a dynamic energy force, and it runs all the systems in our body. In other traditional medicines, it's known as qi. That's probably, you've heard of that in traditional Chinese medicine. In Ayurveda, they call it prana. And homeopaths think of this as an intelligent force. Hahnemann compared it in his work to something like magnetism or gravity, meaning that it's invisible, but we can see the actions of that invisible force in the physical world. So you could look at it something like an operating system of the human. It's what sets our patterns, our perceptions, and how we operate, how our body systems work. So in conventional biology, this understanding of a vital force is kind of looked down upon. This notion that there's something beyond biochemistry that maintains life seems very strange for them. This energy that instructs the biology and the movement and the adaptation of the human doesn't work within their mechanical model of the universe. But this is the foundation of homeopathy. So we believe that when a physical, mental, or emotional shock causes a disruption or imbalance of the vital force starts to express itself in different ways, and this can lead to disease. That means there's a movement of imbalance in our systems. So according to Dr. Hahnemann, in aphorism 11 of the 6th edition of the Organon, the Organon is Dr. Hahnemann's great opus, which really outlines the why, the what, and the how of homeopathy. So when a person falls ill, it is only this spiritual, self-acting, automatic vital force everywhere present in his organism that is primarily deranged by the dynamic influence upon it of a morbific agent inimical to life. So here he's saying that when a person gets sick, it's this spiritual vital force, this energy that's present everywhere in the body that has become imbalanced. And it was an external agent, something that is contrary to life, that has affected it. It is only the vital force deranged to such an abnormal state that can furnish this organism with its disagreeable sensations and incline it to the irregular processes which we call disease. So here he's saying that it's that vital force, when it comes into disbalance, that can create all these different sensations that as homeopaths we can observe externally. So it's that invisible power that we can see and observe in the physical world. Its morbid derangements only make itself known by the manifestation of disease and the sensations and functions of those parts of the organism exposed to the senses, to the observer and the physician. This is by morbid symptoms, no other way that it can make itself known. So here Hahnemann's repeating himself. He's saying that we can only observe the symptoms. We cannot know the underlying energy itself, but by these symptoms, by what we can actually observe, instead of relying on strange theories, we can see and we can prescribe accordingly. The next important tenet I want to talk about is that of minimum dose. And Dr. Miller talked about this, but to recap, this refers to the homeopathic tenet that we must use the least amount of remedy or medicine to elicit a healing response. Now, Dr. Hahnemann discovered the principle of minimum dose while working with poisons. And why was he working with poisons? Well, in his day, those were the substances that we best understood. Homeopathy works with similars, like cures like. So we're looking for a substance that will cause a similar set of symptoms in a healthy person as those that we're trying to cure in a sick person. So we really understood back then the effects of poisons on healthy people, and that made excellent fodder for homeopathic remedies. So unlike his contemporaries, Hahnemann did not want to poison his patients. So he experimented with dilution, and he would dilute these poisons in order to reduce their toxic effect. And it was through experimenting with this that he discovered that despite the dilution, his patient's symptoms were improving quite quickly, and often so much better than with a crude substance. So that is one aspect of the tenet of minimum dose. That is dilution. We often give very diluted doses. Another one is repetition. We try to repeat the remedy the least amount possible to prevent aggravations and suppression. Now, different homeopaths work in different ways, and different schools of homeopathy work in different ways. So I wanted to discuss with you these different possibilities, because I remember when I first went to a homeopath in India, oh, so many years ago, my homeopath gave me a few different remedies. And then from speaking to other people, I learned, oh, no, we don't do that. We only give one remedy at a time. We sit and we watch and we don't repeat. And that created a lot of doubt in my practitioner. But over time, I learned that there are different ways of treating, and that I think all of them, if practiced intelligently, can be very viable. So first, there's how the unicists practice, and this is one remedy at a time that covers the totality of symptoms. They give one small dose, and then they watch and they wait, and they don't repeat until they see how the person responds. And this can be really important because we want to know what is having the effect. If you're mixing a bunch of remedies and a bunch of vitamins and a bunch of other things all together, maybe drugs, you're not going to know what is having the effect that we're observing. So this is important. But other homeopaths will provide some additional support through other modalities, things like tissue salts. These are minerals that all our organs and our organ systems use. They might use flower essences, things like Bach flower remedies. We might use gemotherapy, which is an interesting modality that uses plant remedies that are a little bit diluted. Or we might use other supplements such as vitamins and providing detox support. A homeopath might also alternate remedies, so they might give you something like one remedy that's your constitutional remedy, and then they'll provide some additional remedies that aren't taken at the same time to support acute conditions or to support deep epigenetic states we call miasms. Or they might want to additionally address injuries from allopathic medications that might not necessarily be part of the constitutional picture, and to help support that detox process. And there are also people, often naturopaths or other types of practitioners, who tend to use homeopathic formulas. This is often what you get over the counter in the pharmacy or your grocery store. So, different brands like Boiron, Similia make combination remedies for coughs or for teething. There are also professional combination remedies from companies like Heal and Reckwig. But most classical homeopaths avoid this less precise way of prescribing and will tend to use one remedy or several specifically selected remedies. Now, I wanted to introduce this concept of miasms. I spoke about it briefly with my previous slide. This is a very advanced concept, but I'd like to just introduce it because I think it really shows us how brilliant and ahead of his time Dr. Samuel Hahnemann was. Now, 200 years ago, Hahnemann recognized that illnesses and lifestyles of our parents and our ancestors could affect our health, the following generation's health, by creating different predispositions and creating underlying tendencies. Hahnemann called these predisposition patterns that we inherit miasms. And it was only a few decades ago that allopathic medicine discovered this and we know this is epigenetic conditions. So these miasms are considered the fundamental cause of chronic diseases, and they play a significant role in the development and progression of various health conditions. And in homeopathy, we also believe that they have an influence on our personality and on how we handle stressful situations. Hahnemann himself identified 3 primary miasms. They're called sora, psychosis, and syphilis. And sora, for him, was the most fundamental miasm. It is believed to arise from suppressed skin eruptions. The next miasm, psychosis, was associated with growths or excesses in the body, so leading to things such as warts, cysts, and also different types of disorders like genital and urinary tract disorders and hormonal imbalances. And the syphilitic miasm is associated with destructive and degenerative processes in the body. So syphilitic individuals might have symptoms such as destructive lesions, bone deformities, neurological disorders, things that run much deeper. In modern homeopathy, we've identified many more miasms, and some homeopaths even believe that almost any important disease can lead to a miasmatic state and can lead to that in future generations. So to clarify, Hahnemann believed that when we experience an illness, it affects our genetic condition, it affects our vital force, and that gets passed on to future generations. I want to speak now about suppression and palliation. And this is really important because we believe in homeopathy that often these types of treatment lead to chronic illness, complicate disease, and do not heal. And according to Hahnemann, this is where the allopathic model has really failed us. So according to Stuart Close, a fantastic and important homeopath in the book, The Genius of Homeopathy, suppression or palliation of disease is the removal of external symptoms of disease by external mechanical, chemical, or topical treatment, or by means of powerful drugs given internally in massive doses, which have a direct physiological or toxic effect, but no true therapeutic or curative action. So when Hahnemann started practicing what he called the old school or allopathic medicine, we're using tremendous treatments that were so damaging, things like application of mercury, boring of holes in the skull. And these ideas Hahnemann recognized were causing a lot more harm than good. And that's where he started to develop an understanding of palliation and suppression. So palliation refers to the temporary relief or alleviation of symptoms without addressing the underlying cause of illness. So palliation is a superficial force of treatment that might provide short-term relief, but it doesn't lead to true healing, and it may lead to suppression. So, for example, taking an anti-inflammatory to reduce pain or fever is a type of palliation. Samuel Hahnemann said, palliation, it is true, may at times seem necessary in the case of suffering, but it is wrong and detrimental to the patient if it's employed as a principal mode of treatment. This is aphorism 244. Now, note that he's saying if it's used as the principal mode of treatment. So I think there are times when palliation is absolutely appropriate, especially in end-of-life care. Palliation helps ease transition into death for a person. Or, sometimes a remedy like hypericum, which is prescribed on the indication of pain, it can reduce pain and support a person's healing. Suppression occurs when symptoms are palliated or temporarily relieved, and then they're driven deeper into the body. So this leads to appearance of new, more severe symptoms or the development of chronic illness. Now, to explain this, we have this vital force that's operating our system. And when we get an expression of an imbalance in that vital force, the vital force tries to express that in a way that is not too harmful. So potentially in like the skin, for example, where you might get an eczema, you might get something expressing on the skin as a way of the body detoxing or telling us that something is wrong. It's kind of like your engine alarm in your car. The engine light goes off. It's telling you there's something wrong with your car. You need to take it into the shop in order to diagnose what's wrong. But instead, if you just turn the alarm light off, cut its cables, you get rid of that symptom, but you've done nothing to deal with the condition, the underlying problem that's going to keep causing harm. So when we do that, according to homeopathic theory, this drives the illness deeper. The imbalance still needs to express itself, and now what it was trying to express through the skin or through stimulating a fever now is driven deeper into a more important organ or in a more vital level. So in aphorism 72, Samuel Hahnemann tells us, it's clear, however, from daily experience that these acute diseases, when treated allopathically by the usual antipathic drugs with the design of curing them, are never thoroughly eradicated, but are only palliated, modified, or suppressed for a time, and then at the most become chronic, often degenerating into chronic maladies of the most obstinate nature. So another example that we do might use on a daily basis is an antiperspirant. It suppresses perspiration and interferes with body's detoxing pathways. Another example of this that I see a lot in my practice is eczema in children. So the body's trying to detox in a way, and when we suppress eczema with things like steroids, we're not healing the problem, we're driving it deeper. And often the chain of events there is that a child will develop asthma. So we know that when we're treating that child, if the asthma heals, we've chosen the right remedy, and then often the eczema will re-express itself. And that's a pathway of correct healing. Yeah, we'll move on to the next slide. So instead of suppression and palliation, the homeopath wants to cure. The physician's highest and only calling is to make the sick healthy, to cure as it is called. The highest ideal of therapy is to restore health rapidly, gently, permanently, to remove and destroy the whole disease in the shortest, surest, least harmful way, according to clearly realizable principles. You may have heard this before if you're not brand new to homeopathy. This is aphorism 1 in Hahnemann's Organon. So this is our goal as homeopaths, to provide gentle, complete cure of the underlying system of the source so that the vital force comes into balance and no longer has this need to express illness and disease. So what should you expect when you're going to go see a homeopath? Homeopathic case taking is very different from the conventional approach. The allopath concerns themselves with finding a correct pathological diagnosis, and this has a lot of value in homeopathy, but for us, it's just the tip of what we need to know. A homeopath wants to understand the vital disturbance and treat that. So we look for an individual's expression of symptoms, meaning that, 5 people might have the flu, but they all express themselves in slightly different ways. And each of those people will need a different remedy to assist them. I remember in homeopathic college, when we were learning case taking, we also learned physical exam, and we were studying from an allopathic textbook. And the textbook had us ask the patient long questions around where the illness came from, how it expressed, when it was worse, when it was better, all these things that I find nowadays that I go into the doctor's office and they never ask me those things. You get a 5-minute consultation, got to get you in and out, medication prescribed, and you're out of there. But for me, it was really interesting that traditionally allopathic medicine also had a deeper perspective when looking at a physical diagnosis. However, we still go deeper than that in homeopathy. A homeopath wants to understand the physical, the mental, and the emotional state of a person. We need to have a deep understanding of what it is that needs to be cured. So often a person comes into the office because they're dealing with indigestion, for example, because of one symptom. But a good case taker is going to realize that there's something deeper that needs to be healed. So let's say this person who came in with indigestion has underlying anxiety, and we must alleviate the anxiety in order for the digestive symptoms to clear up. A homeopathic consultation can range anywhere from 15 minutes to 3 hours, depending on the nature of what needs to be cured and how that homeopath works. A homeopath should begin by introducing you to the process, what you're going to expect. And then they're going to ask questions to understand the nature of your condition. They want to understand how to perceive the problem. They want to uncover any environmental factors that may have led to this, physical or emotional traumas, and what's your mental perspective? How do you see the world? They're going to want all these tiny little details, like when do you feel better or worse? Is there a specific time of day? Is there a cold or hot application? Does drinking make you feel better? Does eating make you feel worse? All these little minutiae. They're also going to want to know if there's any new symptoms that are accompanying your key complaint. For constitutional consultation, we're going to want to know about your childhood. What were your major stressors and traumas and transitions in your life? We're going to want to learn about your personality, what you love, what you hate, what gives you joy, fear, anger, peace. And the more honest and divulging you can be with us, the easier it is for us to find the right matching remedy for you. So a homeopath is then going to take all of that totality of information that you provide and we'll analyze it and look for patterns in order to find the right homeopathic remedy that addresses that totality, that underlying pattern. And we have thousands of remedies to work with, upwards of 10,000 now. So we use tools to help us get to the right remedy. We have what's called a repertory, and this can be either a book or software that helps us cross-reference symptoms with remedies. So we can find different symptoms that a person is dealing with and what remedies contain that symptom. We now have in modern homeopathy all kinds of new charts and tools that will also help us find the remedy based on themes that present within a case. And then we take time to do a differential diagnosis, consider different remedies that may be similar and may address your condition. Sometimes, though, the case might be really straightforward. We may prescribe on the spot. And sometimes you need to take some time to really take a deep look at what might potentially be the right remedy for you. Then you can expect follow-ups that ensure that you are prescribed the right remedy. It's really important to follow up with your homeopath because sometimes we make errors in pathology or we want to address any changes that might happen. You start to take a remedy and symptoms come up, or you might have an aggravation, which is a good thing to happen. It means that we've chosen the right remedy, but we want to manage that so that you heal in the most gentle way possible. So in an acute situation, follow-ups might be every couple of hours. And in a chronic, you're looking at about 3 weeks, once a month. Though, homeopathy is about individualization. Every case is different, and every case is going to require a different level of oversight. So I also think that there is so much power to going and having that consultation with the homeopath, to sharing your story and mapping it out. It helps us make connections. It helps us gain perspective onto who we are. We also get to be completely seen and heard by another person. And that in itself can make it a very healing and very positive experience. So I want to thank you for joining me today. If you want to learn more, I encourage you to continue in this incredible, magical rabbit hole. Homeopathy is the study of everything. And we get to learn the underlying patterns of the universe. We get to understand botany. We get to understand geology. We get to understand minerals and energies and animals. And I think it's such an incredible art form that even though I've been practicing for 20 years and studying for much longer, I know that I will never know everything there is to know. And that's what makes it such an incredible art form. So thank you. I do want to encourage you to watch the documentary, and you can learn more about it at magicpillsmovie.com. And we have a free community for people interested in homeopathy, and you can learn more about it on our website. Thank you.